It's important we look at the facts.
Why? Why?
Douglas Ross is sounding pretty scared.
I believe in independence.
And he clapped like a seal.
Hello and welcome back to Planet Holyrood. I'm Paul Hutcheon, political editor of the Daily Record. Joining me this week to chew over the big political events are John Ferguson, who is the political editor of the Sunday Mail, and Douglas Dickie of the Scottish Daily Express. Now, let's get cracking. I think that the big story just now is, of course, the suspension of Fergus Ewing from the SNP group. Fergus Ewing's been an MSP since 1999. He's been a cabinet secretary, but he's been disciplined for a week. And the reason for that is that he voted for a motion of no confidence in Green Minister Lorna Slater, effectively siding with the Tories to bring down a member of the government. And I think it'd be fair to say he's had a decades-long grievance or grudge against certain aspects of Green politics. So this is the big issue at Holyrood just now. It's the one that everyone's talking about. John, starting with you, I think that the 1 week suspension was a foregone conclusion. I think that the SNP leadership always had the votes. How do you see it panning out from here on in?
I think, for the general public, I don't think they are that bothered about internal party discipline in politics. I think what they want is for their MSPs to speak their mind, and the way that this will be settled in the eyes of the public is in terms of who was right and what they were saying. And I think that's where Humza and the wider SNP have got a bit of a problem, because of course, Fergus has stepped out of line. You know, he's voted against one of his own party's government minister, or a government minister in his party's own government. But I don't think that would have come as a massive surprise. He'd been outspoken in his criticism of Lorna Slater, and the problem for the SNP here is that probably most people agree that Lorna Slater has been a pretty poor minister in terms of the debacle with the deposit return scheme. I think that the wider public probably agree with Fergus on quite a few things. For example, the now abandoned fishing ban, in terms of North Sea oil development, in terms of gender policy. So the problem for the SNP here is that the public don't really care about, this suspension in terms of Fergus stepping out of line. What they care about is who's right. And I think most of them probably think Fergus is right. I guess we're going to find out in the Rutherglen by-election next week who people think is right in all of these issues.
Do you think, though, John, see it being Labour or the Tories or the Lib Dems, and they were in government, and one of their backbenchers did exactly the same thing, which was vote for a motion of no confidence. Do you not think that they would have taken the same action?
Yeah, I think they probably would. I think Fergus fully expected to get suspended for a week. He doesn't seem that perturbed about it. You could argue that suspending for a week is a weak move, and really, if Humza Yousaf is that upset with Fergus's conduct, he should perhaps have expelled him from the party, because I don't think his criticism of SNP policy is going to stop because he's been suspended. So I think other parties would probably have taken a similar course of action, but where that leaves the SNP, I don't think is any further forward.
Dougie, just to bring you in, just look at the future now for Fergus and his options. He could just serve his punishment and go back into the SNP fold after a week. He could sit as an independent for the next couple of years, or of course he could even defect to Alex Salmond's Alba party. Now, I asked him about that about 20 minutes ago, and he refused to answer the question. What do you think he's going to do?
I think he'll go back. I think he'll serve his suspension, and he'll go back into the SNP, at least for now. I think his comments last night hinted to me at a guy who feels he's got unfinished business within the SNP. He obviously feels the SNP is going in the wrong direction. I need to be honest, this whole episode, it's starting to bore me. It's kind of tiresome. I'm getting a bit tired of Fergus Ewing wanting to play the martyr. It seems to me that that's what he wants to do. I think he likes that position of being the firebrand within the party. Whereas if he was to go to Alba, then he would just be one of many who are taking pot shots at Humza Yousaf. He could sit as an independent. I personally think he'll go back now. I think he'll continue to do what he's been doing. As John says, he seems to be quite enjoying himself, and we may well find ourselves here again in a few months' time. Probably won't be another vote of no confidence in Lorna Slater. As John said, I don't think anyone could blame him in terms of her ability as a minister for voting against her. But of course, you know, as an SNP, MSP, there's certain things expected of him, and one of them would have been to back a government minister. So I think he will go back in, although it is interesting that he refuses to answer the question. It feels like a bit of a football analogy. He's been linked with a move to Alex Salmond's Alba. He'll be a free agent for a week, so they can sign him up with that transfer fee. So
free transfer.
So if he does go to Alba and a Bosman, I would be surprised, but rule absolutely nothing out with him, because he obviously doesn't feel that he's done anything wrong. He's obviously committed to the SNP. Whether he's committed to the Scottish Government is a different thing. So it's I don't think this is over by a long shot.
What I think is interesting, Dougie, if you go back to Alex Salmond's leadership, he always had this big tent.
Yeah.
He was a populist leader, and he had policies that appealed to people on the left, and then people on the centre right, like business rates and all the rest of it. And so that kept people like Fergus Ewing in the tent. You had people like Chris Stevens, the sort of socialist MP, and they all sort of buried their differences because there was a sort of broad-based political approach there. Now, Humza Yousaf is identifiably in the centre-left. He's taken positions that would probably alienate people like Fergus. Do you think it shows now that the SNP isn't that big tent, that they're more ideologically narrower than they were in the past?
I think it shows that the SNP leadership is, whether the SNP as a party is. I mean, we've seen it at the leadership election, 48%. Once Ash Reagan, I mean, I've no idea why she even ran, but once she was kind of out, 48% going for Kate Forbes. She obviously represents that kind of Fergus Ewing part of the party, but certainly, I mean, not just Humza. I think Nicola Sturgeon kind of started this. She started this kind of move towards very much a centre-left party, and Humza Yousaf has obviously taken it on, but the leadership contest showed that the membership itself is maybe still quite split, and it'll be interesting to see if some people see the direction that the leadership is taking. And I mean, we've seen it elsewhere with the SNP that I know we'll come to this on North Sea oil and gas. We've seen those splits there as well. People in the northeast maybe not as angry about oil fields as those in the Central Belt. So, but Humza Yousaf certainly does want to take that narrower stance than certainly Alex Salmond did.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on, John. School strike. This is affecting a huge number of people across Scotland. Parents, pupils, staff who are taking industrial action. Just to sum it up, there is a big dispute between the unions and council chiefs on council pay. And as a result of that dispute, it's the school staff that have been taken out. They're the ones who've walked out this week for 3 days. That's the Unison members. Now, some strikes have public support, others don't, and the facts of any industrial dispute are always different. What are your thoughts, John, on whether you think the public are behind this one and whether they have sympathy for the striking workers?
I think that this is a big problem that's not going to go away. Last year, we saw round after round of strikes and threats over strikes. This is happening because inflation has been running above 10% at times. Pretty much everybody has seen their real wages fall. Everybody feels that they've got a moral right to fight for at least sustained wages. And the government in Scotland and at the UK level has shown that they are willing to bend in the face of a strike threat. So I don't think it's surprising that this is happening. I think that this is going to go on and on into the next couple of years. In terms of public support for this particular strike, it's an interesting one because arguably, these workers are probably some of the lowest paid that have threatened or have gone on strike in recent rounds. We've obviously had junior doctors threatened to go on strike, nurses, teachers. These are all professions that are higher paid than the in the main than the staff that are threatening to go on strike now. So, I mean, I think that they've got a good case that they deserve more. I think if public opinion is starting to wane on this, it's just it's not because of this particular cause. It's just the build up of these actions and parents genuinely feeling that this is now going to start having an impact on their children's education. So I don't think that there isn't support, but I think that people are genuinely worried for public services.
Dougie, see if you go back to the strikes last autumn, last year during the Edinburgh Festival when the rubbish was piling up, there was no doubt that the unions were united on that. There might have been some differences behind the scenes, but they did present a united front. This time, though, in terms of the school strike, it's Unison that are pushing ahead with the walkout, while the GMB and Unite suspended their strike action and put it to their members, which Unison have also done. What do you make of the tensions between the unions on this particular issue?
Well, it obviously shows that they're not all on the same page now. Unison obviously feel they didn't even put it to their members. Maybe they felt they had.
I think they are putting it to the members. I think the difference is that Unison didn't suspend their strike action.
Yeah. Sorry, they didn't suspend the strike action. I think it showed maybe they felt they'd kind of gone too far. They kind of committed too much to it. They might have thought it would be a sign of weakness. They obviously want to show, local governments that they mean business, that they're serious about this. It's obviously really damaging for kids' education. Although I spent the weekend with my young niece and she didn't seem too perturbed about it. So it's hard to see maybe how they going forward if this were to happen again. Is it going to be harder for them to kind of present that united front? As you say, last year it was very much right across the board. So I think it's a time will tell thing for Unison whether this turns out to have been a tactical mistake or whether it's something that helps them get the deal they want. They've obviously seen the government bend at times. The SNP government always seems to be find a few million quid in the side of the sofa to.
I'm not sure they're going to do that this time. I think that the phrase that COSLA used, best and final offer, I'm not convinced there's going to be more, because I think that COSLA and the government will probably use these union divisions to their own advantage. My analysis of it is that the GMB and Unite are more favourable to this because they see it as quite a good deal for the lower paid ones, the lower paid workers. Now, Unison do represent lower paid workers as well, but they also represent the sort of managerial class and the ones who you maybe describe as middle income earners. I think it's them that they're holding out for. They want a bit more for folk around like 40, 45 grand. And I just feel like Unison are a bit isolated on that front. If all three unions were singing from the same hymn sheet, then the Scottish Government might feel compelled to come back to the table. But it just feels different to me compared to this time last year. What do you think, John?
Yeah, it's definitely... It makes people think twice, doesn't it, if all the unions aren't united and fighting for the same thing. I think that the government can probably see that. And yeah, I mean, I think that the deeper issue here is that there genuinely isn't very much money about to pay for these things. And but whether it's, you know, I think that is going to be the biggest driving force in cause of saying, look, we can't go any further.
What do you, Dougie, do you think that trade unions popular in Scotland? Do you think that they carry more public support than south of the border, or do you think it's pretty much standard throughout the UK?
I think it's pretty standard. I think maybe opposition to them south of the borders maybe a wee bit more pronounced. I think on the whole, you know, especially during a cost of living crisis, I think everyone believes everyone else should be getting, you know, paid in line with inflation. Obviously, it's not always possible, but I don't think the support is much different from here to it is maybe in England and Wales, but I think maybe the opposition to it down south, I think if you know, we're obviously taking it from a kind of centre-right position. I think the Scottish Tories are maybe a wee bit softer on unions, and, you know, the UK Tories, who are obviously, you know, want to bring through this anti-strike, I suppose it's been called, legislation. So I think people do, you know, on the whole, but it's often easy to support strikes that maybe don't impact you on a day-to-day basis. I'm not sure someone who's got 3 kids running about the house right now might, you know, would agree with that. And ultimately, though, you know, those are the people that kind of pay the price for it. At the end of the day, it was the same with the bins last year. It was, you know, a bit of the government's fault, a bit of Cause's fault. But I think people were all, you know, were also getting a bit fed up with the rubbish piling high, and they were just like, why, you know, can they not just come and clean this up? I think ultimately people support strikes when it doesn't really impact on them. It's very similar to train. You know, train wasn't strikes with ScotRail, but, you know, working to rule, no overtime and stuff like that. You know, I think they lost their sympathy for that pretty quickly. And I think if this continues, and, you know, especially parents who are suddenly having to deal with, you know, absences from school, they might see that support slip away.
I feel like over the last 18 months, the unions have actually had some pretty good results in the public sector. You know, you go back to last August, they really used their leverage and used their muscle. I'm just not convinced that Unison will get the result they want this time. I just feel like these divisions will not be to their advantage. So we'll see how that goes. Moving on, John, Rosebank. I mean, where do we start with this? The Tory government has basically said that you know, they're in support of this new oil field. It looks like it'll get a licence before the general election, I think. This has created a massive row because of the link between fossil fuels and climate change. It's been described as irresponsible, climate wrecking. What's your view on this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting issue because it gets right to the heart of the things we've been talking about earlier in terms of where the SNP are now vis-a-vis someone like Fergus Ewing, and whether that's in line with what the public think. If you go back to the referendum in 2014, you can remember people sort of talked, and it was always treated like a conspiracy theory that there was this huge oil field off Shetland with 500 million barrels of oil in it, and this would mean that Scotland could have an incredibly rich and prosperous future as an independent country. This was poo-pooed by the unionist parties. Now we're in this crazy position of having a Conservative government who are saying, let's drill this oil out, let's create loads of jobs and tax revenue from this resource that we've got in the North Sea, and the SNP are saying, no, we think we should leave it in the ground to save the planet. Now, whether that's right or wrong ethically is one thing, but what it's really going to be, the real question is, what do the public think about that? We were talking earlier about whether the SNP had become a more intolerant sort of centre-left party or not. And I think that the big change that's happened in the SNP is that they have really embraced a green agenda. You can see this running through a lot of their most controversial policies. And the thing about that is that, rightly or wrongly, you've got to ask yourself, do the public broadly agree with them? I think we know that they don't. If it was the case that they did, then the Green Party would be winning elections in Scotland, not the SNP. So I think if you looked at the statement Alex Salmond put out yesterday, that would have been pretty much what the SNP would have been saying 10 years ago. He said, look, it's crazy to ignore this. We're going to be taking in oil and gas from other countries for the foreseeable future. Let's have our own industry and let's be a leader in decarbonising that industry through carbon capture and storage and electrifying oil rigs and all the rest of it. Now, the science in that may not be entirely proven, but that would have been the line that the SNP would have been taking 7-8 years ago, and it would have, or maybe 10 years ago, and it would have pacified people on both sides of the debate. What we have now is that we're going over a very hard line, if you like, green policy agenda, and it's questionable.
Is it a hard line? Is it a hard line green agenda?
Well, yeah, I think it's from the point of view that if you go into the northeast of the country, people will say, no, this is. I think that whether you like it or not, people are. People want to solve the climate crisis until it gets to the point where it's possibly having a really big and detrimental impact on their lives, and people in the northeast will feel that it is. And I think that if what you're saying is this involves running down the country's biggest industry, and I think generally, people have got a memory. People view Scotland's oil industry as being a very key industry to Scotland's economic prosperity. So it's a tough ask to say we think we should actually run that industry down, and that maybe this new green economy will take off. That is a pipe dream at the moment. The oil industry is a real thing.
Dougie, see, if you look at this from the Tories' perspective, do you think that they are doing this primarily for reasons of economic security or electoral gain?
Probably a little bit of both. Of course, economic security would also bring electoral gain. I think they know that. I think John's absolutely right. I think the public, on the whole, don't have a problem with Rosebank. I listened to Chris Packham on the radio earlier today. He's obviously a bit more, sceptical of it, shall we say, to be polite. But the people coming on after him were just, he's talking cobblers. He's completely out of touch. He doesn't know, what life is like in the real world, and I think that is kind of the point here. I think this just transition, they call it, I don't think people really understand what it's going to entail. I don't even think those who are really pushing for it understand what it's going to be, what it's going to entail, and it's going to be the people, as ever, at the bottom of the rung who suffer the most. So I think it's maybe aimed at those kind of working class voters who, lent Boris's vote back in 2019. It's certainly directed at them. obviously, if it helps, improve the economic outlook, then that's an election boost as well. You
reference, just to cut in for a second there, Dougie, you referenced the real world, but surely the real world includes the impacts of climate change, which are fundamentally driven by fossil fuels. So you've got folks in other parts of the world which are becoming uninhabitable, and you're
absolutely
having fires, floods, droughts, everything.
I think I absolutely agree with you, but I think it comes down to what I alluded to a few minutes ago. Here in Britain, it's slightly, hotter summers for a couple of days. People, they maybe don't see the impact of it properly elsewhere. There's also this feeling, of course, that, we've got China, India, Russia pumping out all these pollutants that, we might be urinating into the wind. I'll use the politer term. And I think you can see, it's. I mean, John said that the SNP want to keep it in the ground. I'm not sure that's entirely true with all of them. We've already seen Dave Duggan within minutes, Humza Yousaf criticising it. Dave Duggan comes out. I mean, I thought it was quite an admission from him that he thought because he can't stop it, he's not going to bother doing anything about it. I don't know if that's what you want to hear from an elected politician, but it's just. I mean, we're probably doomed anyway, so we might as well go out with some comfort, So it's such a hard one. It does go across party lines as well. You've got Tories who are angry about it. I know Zach Goldsmith spoke out about it this morning. So it's something that goes across party lines. I think Rishi Sunak has seen which way the wind's blowing in it from the public's point of view, and that's part of the decision, part of why he's made that decision.
All right, let's wrap up. Comrades, good week, bad week. Let's start with you, John.
So I think it's been a bit of a PR disaster for Humza Yousaf having penciling in the disciplinary action for Fergus Ewing a week before the Rutherglen by-election. It was always going to be something that had the potential to backfire. It wasn't going to pass off as a huge victory for the SNP. What it's done is it's made the party look split and at war. So I think that's and it's highlighted all of these really contentious policies. So I think it's been a bad week for Humza getting into that by-election. The by-election's going to be the thing that will probably settle the argument in terms of who's right on that, or that's how it will be viewed. I think it's been a good week, reversely, for Fergus Ewing. I don't think the idea that he enjoys being a rebel is a bit strong, given that he's someone who's spent a lifetime in the party towing the line. But it seems to me that, rightly or wrongly, he genuinely feels that he needs to speak out in this because it's he must speak in the interests of his constituents. He's clearly decided he's going to do that, and he doesn't want to go out with a whimper. So he's like the guy who's getting all the attention now, and he seems to be quite enjoying it. I don't think he's going to go away.
Fair enough. Dougie, you?
Bad week. I've went for Katie Loudoun, the SNP's candidate in the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election. Funny enough, prior to this week, I thought she was actually having quite a good time of it. I think the Labour campaign's been really uninspiring, but she seems to have blown it quite a bit this week. She's kind of woolly on council tax rises. She's woolly on the prospect of a congestion charge for her constituents going into Glasgow. She let the cat out the bag in an interview the other day when she said she would always follow the SNP's line, even if it's detrimental to Rutherglen and Hamilton West. And then she was reduced yesterday to putting out an open letter to Labour supporters in Rutherglen and Hamilton West to effectively lend her vote to send a message to Keir Starmer. I've got to say my teeth hurt reading that. It was so cringeworthy. I think that's a sign of somebody who's desperate, who knows. funny enough, again, a few days ago, if you'd asked me who's going to win in Rotherham Hamilton West, I'd say Labour probably will win, but I think it's going to be a lot tighter than people maybe expect it to be. I think that was a sign that maybe the SNP aren't, the messages they're getting in the door suggests something different. And as if just to confound our misery, I'm told there was a hustings event in Rotherham today, which we attended, and I'm told that while she was trying to make a point, a paper sign fell on top of her. So it's not been a wonderful week for Katie, and I suspect next week's not going to be a great one for her either. For good week, I've gone for Megan Gallagher, the Scottish Conservatives deputy leader and Scottish Express columnist. Make sure you pick up your copy at the weekend.
What a suit! Give it to your own columnist.
To read Megan's thoughts. So she's brought forward legislation that would make it a specific crime to vandalise or damage war memorials, and I think it's going to be one of those rare moments where Holyrood is more or less united. I think she's already got cross-party support for it, and I think it will cement her position as a bit of a rising star of the Parliament, and I'm sure we all wish her well with that. And so it's been a good week for her.
Okay, I think that's it. Pretty much done. Obviously, next week, as you both mentioned, the big issue is going to be the Rutherglen Hamilton West by-election. We're going to get a result after what felt like maybe the longest campaign in history. So we will have a special Planet Holyrood after the result comes in, and I hope that you all can tune in and watch that. So thanks again for following us.
I think it's important we look at the facts.
Why?
Douglas Ross is sounding pretty scared.
Because I believe in independence.
And he clapped like a seal.